So over the past 46 days, I've gotten a lot of questions asked of me of just what's going on, how do I feel, and I didn't really have a whole lot of time to answer all of them. So what I tried to do was write down the most common questions that I got asked, and this is the time I'm going to be able to answer them to you. So, go ahead.
All right, first question. What inspired this diet idea?
Okay, this diet idea was inspired by the Bavarian monks that I found, and I really got into this story researching it when I owned the tap room at the time, and it was kind of this big dream thing to own a tap room and then be the guy that drank beer for 46 days while he worked at the tap room and something along that lines, and then life just kind of got in the way and had to sell the tap room. I started a YouTube channel. I wanted to do something every year that was a beer themed diet, and this was the third year, and I decided to finally pull the trigger and do this. So yeah.
All right. Did you really only drink beer to survive for 46 days? No food at all?
Yes, no one believes me on this point. It was only beer. Now, when people say only beer, and when I say only beer, I mean, I do have to include, I did have water, and I did have a daily vitamin to give myself, but I didn't have any food, I didn't have any vegetables, I didn't chew anything for 46 days. I didn't have a protein shake. It was barley, hops, malt, yeast. That was it.
And I, being his wife, lived it. It's true. I do not know why people don't believe this. That's just my own 2 cents. What time of day did you enjoy a beer the most? Ooh. Was it breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or as a snack because you had a craving?
Oh, that's a good one. I would probably have to say lunch because it would be the first beer of the day. I would just be drinking so much water, and it was just very bland throughout the whole morning that any form of flavor. But the odd thing would be that eventually over time, my taste buds eventually changed, and even that first beer was just like sipping on sweet candy, malted water. And if I didn't have the right beer, was kind of actually disgusting, but I just wanted the calories.
Okay.
But for the most part, it was lunch.
Okay.
Esque.
Listening to you describe beer makes me want one. It's like you're pretty good at that. What kept you going? Because 46 days is a long time.
Actually, yeah. Week 2, 3, and 4 were actually pretty simple. My body kind of cruised through it with support from people online and at home. It was relatively easy. In fact, I got to do some creative things with food and just using my sense of smell. And just using my sense of smell, I got to semi-experience food. So that really helped. What just kept me going is I'm that type of guy. If I just commit to something, I'm gonna do that. And if you know me, and any of my personal friends who know me will admit that if I say I'm gonna do something, and if it's crazy, I'm still gonna do it.
The actual definition of that word for it is stubborn, but also successful. So we'll just leave it at that. So how did you feel throughout? Do you feel like from week 2 to week 4, did you feel any major changes along the way that stood out to you?
Yeah, there was a lot of changes in clarity, actually. Like, I wouldn't say I could see things better. It was more just I was able to focus on things a lot faster and easier. I also felt like I was getting better sleep, better REM cycle sleep type thing. So I don't know if that equated to better energy. But I also did notice my energy would die very fast. So there was that aspect. But I always felt like I had really good energy when I had it, and it was always willing to do things, and I was always very focused, so I could always picture things how I was going to do it very easily. So that was something pretty interesting that I've never experienced before.
Okay, so it seems like it deepened your sense of logic?
Yeah, deepened my sense of logic and just way of thinking things through. Sense of smell was a big thing too.
Yeah, talk about that for a second, because I think that was one of the biggest things that happened within the first 3 days.
Yeah, my sense of smell just tenfold, hundredfold all throughout the whole time. Probably within the first 2 weeks, just kept climbing. I could smell things from upstairs that you would be doing downstairs. I would smell things from a microwave that was at the other end of my office. I would walk by and someone like put tuna in the microwave, which would normally gross most people out. And I was like, this smells wonderful.
I seem to remember that differently because that was us, because we have a 5-year-old and he likes warm tuna and you thought you were going to die. So
there was that day.
I remember that being a little different.
Yeah, that was the other bad part. When something was bad, it was bad and it just rank.
Yeah. How is that now?
Stuck around for about a week and a half. And I could tell it was slowly dying down.
So it tapered off.
It tapered off, and it's probably right back down to normal now. So roughly after about 2 weeks or so, it dies back down to normality.
Okay. So what did an actual buzz feel like on this diet?
That's actually a very common question I got, because a lot of people thought I would be wasted the whole time. Having an empty stomach on a normal day and drinking booze, you get buzzed very fast. After about the 3rd day, my body adapted, and because I was drinking so much water, roughly around 2 to 4 liters a day, depending upon the day, I would just drink a heavy beer, 9 to 10, 12% beer, which normally on a normal day I would feel pretty good. I would be completely dead sober within 30 minutes.
So
it was still the same buzz.
Okay.
But it was such a fast-moving buzz. It would just, oh, I feel really good, and I just peed, and I'm done.
Okay, so if you drank more, like when you're going out with your friends or whatever, or you're doing the happy hour, and you drink more to keep that buzz going, if you did that on this diet, how did you feel?
Roughly the same.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It was the same. There was probably, out of the 46 days, only 2 days that I probably went overboard.
Okay.
And it wasn't really the amount of beers I had in that day. It was just consuming them back to back to back, all in a shorter period of time. Roughly about 2 hours after that, I felt normal, but then the next day I could tell it wasn't a hangover, but it was like, oh, I don't feel as good. I can definitely tell I felt like I overdid it.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it wasn't, oh, I'm hungover, my head hurts, and I'm sleepy. It was just, I don't feel as good as I normally would if I stuck to my regular routine.
Roughly how many beers did you have a day?
I estimated it was between the first couple of weeks, between the first 3 weeks, it was 4 to 5 beers a day. And then around end of week 4 or 5, my stomach just kind of got used to it, and I didn't even need to have that much. I actually shrank down to 3 to 4. It was actually really hard to drink 4 beers a day. I think because my stomach just shrank so much, and I wasn't doing so much physical activity. I would still do physical activity, but I just wasn't like, I'm gonna go do this project because I can and burn through it. I had to pace myself, and because of that, my calorie count didn't need to be as high. And so toward the end, it was 3 to 4 beers a day, but then I really wanted to hit a goal of at least 200 beers by the end of this, and I had to calculate how many. And it was the end of week 5 and week 6, or 6.5 essentially, that I had to up it to 5 beers a day. And for those first couple of days I had to do 5, it was like overeating a meal. It was just like, oh, I feel stuffed. I don't feel good. Yeah, that was just very interesting.
Okay. So this is kind of a 2-part question. So one of the number one questions you and I discussed while you were doing this, because mind you, I lived with him for 46 days while he did this. So a lot of people asked, and I asked this multiple times too throughout it, what was your favorite beer? But as this went on, I started realizing, was it that you had a favorite beer, or was it that you had a favorite style because maybe a style more ended a craving for you or sustained you longer? Was it more of a style, or was it an actual singular beer that you liked?
That was a very common question I got, and you asked that a few times too. At first, my thought into going into this diet was, I'm trying to do this as traditional as possible. I only want to have beers that technically lean toward the Reinhauskebot's traditional beer style. No adjuncts, no nothing, just the barley, hops, yeast, and malt. And over time, it kind of got really hard to find beers like that because, like I said earlier, my taste buds changed so fast that beers like this one or some of my favorite IPAs were tasting so sweet like candy. And I knew I needed high calorie beers. And to get a high calorie beer, you had to have a higher ABV, which usually meant a higher malt count. So I could never find a low calorie, non-malty sweet beer. So that's when I had to kind of abandon that thought process toward the last 2 weeks and just be like, well, it's still technically beer. It's classified as beer no matter where I go. And there are these particular adjuncts in there. So now I started the last 2 weeks really enjoying sour beers and farmhouse ales, something funky, just because there wasn't a whole lot of malt in those, or it was more like a smoothie style beverage. So it kind of was a meal. So it really was toward those last 2 weeks, week and a half, I really started to enjoy more wild ales or funky beers just because it was a different take and it was something different other than, 5 weeks of drinking malty, chocolatey roastedness, IPA bitterness. Even some of the most bitter beers that I've ever had before tasted like candy. So
Interesting.
it was very odd because I purposely went and bought a bunch of beers. Like, I know I love this beer, so I'll be able to drink it. Yeah, after the third week, I was like, I never want to touch that thing again, but I have so many of them.
Well, that's kind of the perfect segue to the next question that you got asked probably the most was, did you get sick of beer?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know.
No. It was after I was done, and then the next day, people were like, oh, you're just going to have water or something. Nope. Still, I ended up having like 3 beers.
Yeah, I remember. Because I even said, are you not sick of beer? And like, no, I still love it. So that all of those kind of wrap into all these next questions. Did you miss hard liquor?
Yes, I did actually miss hard liquor because I really do love a good cocktail or sipping on a nice bourbon or scotch, something, just a little bit of it. Because there's just not that carbonation level that can upset your stomach after you drink so much. When I'm having food, the food is filling me up, and then the carbonation of a beer fills me up even more, and I don't like to feel that bloatiness. On this diet, I didn't feel that because I didn't have anything inside of me other than water and beer. So there wasn't quite this bloatiness. When I do have a meal, especially at nighttime for dinner or dessert, I will pour myself a nice, bourbon or something like that, bourbon on the rocks or whiskey on the rocks, and just sip on that. And it's nice because it's only 3 or 4 ounces. So I did miss that aspect, but I still really love beer. So
I feel like we're at the point that that's a given. I mean, it's just a given. So we got to ask this question because you've been asked it a lot. You've been asked it on the radio. What were your poops like? Let's just get down to it.
Yeah, and the times I could answer that question, I would tell people you have to have solid food to have solid poop. And so if you could imagine what peeing out both ends is like, that's what it was like. The good part is a lot less toilet paper and you are in and out really fast.
I'm going to give no comment on that. Just going to pass on that. So all in all, what did this diet cost in terms of money?
Roughly around $500 to buy, but then after bottle returns and everything like that, around $475-esque. You get about $20 back in bottle returns. I did have technically some extra beers left, so if I excluded that and just said, hey, here's what all the other beers cost me, but I did have some already stored, so I'm still going to stick around with that $500 mark.
Would you recommend this beer experiment to anybody else?
I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't discourage it though. I would say that if you we're planning on doing something even remotely like this, 30 days, 2 weeks, 46, however long. Don't be a fool. Do a lot of research. I researched this for over a year and a half, looking into things, reading other people's experience, gotten to talk to some of the other few people that have documented their experience doing this and got to talk to them about this. Don't sit there and think this is some college kegerator frat party type thing. It's not that.
You got that a lot.
I got that a lot. This is just as serious as any diet. It's a serious thing. So if you're going to do it seriously. Don't do it foolishly.
What did an entire day look like while doing this?
So an entire day, my routine that I eventually took about a week to figure out was that I would wake up and I would go have a big pint of water. Usually it was like the big English Imperial pint, so like 22 ounces of water. And I found that if I had room temperature or warm water, which kind of sounds disgusting, but I could just chug that down in seconds. And then I would save about 4 to 6 ounces at the back end and go have my daily vitamin. So I just had my daily vitamin in the morning. That way I had some form of liquid in me just before I had my vitamin. And then I would go to work, start drinking my water, and basically wait till 12 o'clock.
Okay, so 12 o'clock was your first beer of the day.
First beer of the day was still 12 o'clock. I'm going to try to have my beers or my meals during my meal time. And also I knew I wanted to keep my body very flushed and hydrated. So I knew that by the time my lunch break was over, I would be dead sober already. I could take a breathalyzer and still be dead sober. By the time I was done with my 1 hour break. So if I had it right at my 12 o'clock, I'd have 1 hour and I'd be done. I'd be sober. So I knew I'd be fine. And then and then after lunch, I'd have more water. And I would drive home. During the drive, more water. I'd get home. I would need to have a beer right when I got home. Usually I'd get home about 5:30-esque. I needed to have a beer right then because I was probably 30 minutes away. I should have had a beer at 5. I was hungry. I'd have a beer, prep dinner for the family, and then have another beer while family was having dinner. So
right.
I'd essentially have a quick snack and then have another bigger beer for dinner. Play with the family, do whatever I needed to do, and then once the kid went to bed, probably have another beer if I needed one. And that would be the dessert or midnight snack, late night snack. And that's the day. Go to bed. Usually I went to bed a lot earlier, so roughly around 10 to 10:30. Where my normal time on my normal days would be around midnight if I didn't already fall asleep on the couch. So
I think we've had like a top 3 questions, but if I was going to have it go to 4, I would definitely say one of the most popular questions was, would you do this again? I asked that a lot during this diet.
You did ask that a lot. As of right now, I don't want to do it again.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to doing it again. There are definitely things I would change.
That was a question I personally had was there anything you would do differently?
It's hard because I think this could have been done with probably 39 days or 4 days. I don't think I needed to do the whole 46, but then I kind of started thinking about that, where if I was going to do the modern 40 days of Lent, which when this diet was first made, you didn't get a break. And that was introduced later down by a different pope. But if I took a cheat day, which would have been every Sunday, I think my body would not like that because it would be going back into restart mode and I would be jump starting it. And it just takes time to get back into the swing of things of normal life, to rebuild your gut and your digestive system. And I think if you did that 6 times between the 40 days, you're probably actually going to struggle even more. So I don't know, but yeah, prepping, using particular styles of beers, knowing a budget, all of that type of stuff, I would have probably prepped for better if I was ever to do it again. As far as in next year, I'm not planning on doing this again. Maybe in the distant future to revisit just that experience to see if anything's changed, how I feel older doing it, or knowing what it maybe, I don't know. But
It's a never say never thing.
never say never, but right now, zero desire.
So another question, because I guess we're going for the top 5 questions then. The other question was, what was the first thing you were going to eat? So now that you're done, what was the first thing you ate?
Well, the very first thing I ate was a very simple ramen chicken soup type deal. Tried to be something light. And my gosh, that was one of the best tasting things I've ever had. It was like playing in the snow for 8 hours and having that 50-cent cheap hot cocoa, and it just warms your body up. And you know it's the worst, cheapest, watered down cocoa thing, but you're like, this is delicious. And that's what I had. I had a 50-cent thing of ramen. But it was the best tasting ramen ever. It just warmed my body up. But the first meal I desired was a meal that I particularly love, is one of my favorite that you make, is a bacon white sauce ravioli with some garlic bread, and that was delicious. It's very fatty, very gluttonous-y, but yeah, bacon, Parmesan, cheese, and noodles, and garlic. Oh, yes, it's so good.
At that point, you had earned it.
Yes.
I have one last question for you.
Okay.
You just don't get any time to think about it.
Ooh, hang on. Go.
Do you love your wife more than beer?
Oh, yes.
That's all my questions.
Okay. All right. Now, if there aren't any questions I didn't get to answer, go ahead and leave a comment below, and I will get to it. So I do answer all the comments. It might take me a second or two, but I will answer that. So those are probably the most common questions that I got asked. And now I think let's talk about the big thing that everyone wanted to know. What happened to me and my body, and what changed? And we're going to go to that now.